Energy is everywhere and something we all need, but something we take for granted until there's an electrical storm, we can't find gas, or even there's a blackout. But today I've lined up a heavyweight on Inside Fort Worth Today, Fort Worth's only video magazine focused on telling the stories of the faces and personalities of the city and cultivating business. I'm Chris Quinn, and today we're focusing on energy. And I've got a great lineup of heavyweights, starting with Dr. Ken Morgan from the TCU Energy Institute, which is going to talk to us about energy. He goes really around the country talking to people about natural gas and the implications of it. And I think you're really going to enjoy what he has to say. Then from the Institute of Environmental Studies, Dr. Michael Slattery is going to talk to us about wind. When we think about wind, what does it mean? What is the role? I mean, Texas was one of the largest wind states in the country, but I don't think about, when we think about wind, do we think about wind? Then I have someone that has been doing regulatory for over 10 years who's the president of NOGRA. Mary Carter Starkey is going to talk to us about the health and wealth of the wells. And what does that mean? I mean, when you think about health and wealth, what does that mean? But it plays a huge role when we talk about the wells and energy with the wells. So she's here to talk to us and really what all that means. And then finally, I thought about this a lot about if you're going to get into petroleum or petroleum engineering, what would attract you to that? Why would you be interested in doing that? So I seeked out a millennial to tell us that story, to tell us the why of what attracted her to do that. So today is all about TCU. We've got a lot of TCU people in the house. She's also an Aggie, but also someone that went to TCU. So we've got a lot of people that are a part of the TCU Energy Institute, which does a great job over there. So I'm excited to talk about energy. It covers, that's a big word, right, when you think about energy. You're watching us live on Fort Worth Today and on YouTube at CQ Digital Media. And we're thrilled you're here with us each and every week for this live broadcast. And like I said, I'm excited to talk to our first guest, Dr. Ken Morgan, who is a good friend of mine, who has done a lot for us. Dr. Morgan?
Glad to see you, Chris.
Welcome. When you think about energy today, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Energy today is really energy tomorrow. We have to understand where we are in the energy game. It's a big game. 100 quadrillion BTUs are needed just for our country. And that's a lot of energy. We have to educate people about how we get it, how we're going to produce it in the future, what it's going to cost an economy, and all the good it does throughout the world. Energy is the base for food, it's the base for clean water, it's the base for health.
Great. Okay, now that was a lot right there. Mm-hmm. Okay. You go around the country talking to people about this. What's the biggest question or concern you get from people?
I think the biggest concern is, where will the United States be in the future? Are we going to be a leader in energy? Throughout my life, we were always importing so much of it, we weren't a leader in it. But things have changed here dramatically in the last 10, 12, 15, 20 years because of the Barnett Shale, the shale plays, the resurrection of Midland, Texas, and what we might do. More infrastructure has been built, and the United States is now potentially one of the great leaders in production and maybe even selling some energy across the world where it's needed so badly.
Right. Okay, when I think of energy, that means natural gas, that means fossil fuels. We're going to talk about wind a little bit, but it's just not one resource, right?
It's no longer one resource, but we understand our oil and gas business, that's base fuels. That's the foundation for every energy source that we have in this country and for a lot of countries around the world. Yes, as we're investing in some alternatives that complement it, because if we're going to, let's say we're going to globally be a real leader in energy, we're going to need all resources on the table so that we can help balance our budget, help countries that need energy resources to, again, help their economies. So when we look at it now, it's a much broader and expanded base of energy. But oil and gas is here to stay because of what it does to bolster your energy base.
Great. What does that mean to us, the consumer, though?
Cheap prices. As long as you've got energy that you can produce domestically, look at natural gas. We have inexpensive natural gas because we produce all that we have, all that we need. If you don't, somebody else is kind of jerking the chain once in a while, and it can upset your economy. All of a sudden, jobs start to fall out of the market. It can have inflation issues. So domestic energy and its production is what we're talking about. And at least the United States now is in the driver's seat.
So, like I said in the beginning, energy isn't something we really think about until I think there's an energy crisis. Fair?
That's very fair. Matter of fact, we're trying to teach our young students. They plug into a wall. Maybe they're getting their iPhones or whatever it is going. They're not sure what's behind that wall. So we take students down to show where electrical energy production is made. Hey, whether it's a natural gas electrical plant, a nuclear plant in Glen Rose, or some of our wind energy that we produce so much here in Texas. What's behind the wall? And that's where we start that energy story, much less when you get in your car, when you get on an airplane, how energy is so integrated into our daily lives.
Great. The TCU Energy Institute, how many countries visited the Institute last year?
We have over 20 countries a year through the State Department. Matter of fact, next week we have from the Middle East are coming in again. We see a great interest about the United States position in the coming years. They're coming in. I have a core lab. That's the rock that they pull out of the earth to study in detail the chemistry of it. And they want to come and see that core lab. This is their third trip here out of the Middle East. But 15 to 20 countries a year. And of course, they are interested in how we turned this around from becoming the biggest importer on the planet to potentially being an exporter.
Great. So it's about education.
About education. It's always about education for us at the Energy Institute. That's why I get to go around the country. I'm called in to say, what is Texas doing? What does this mean for the rest of the nation? And what does it mean for our country as a whole? And if we can educate along those lines, and that's what we're trying to do with all of our educational programs. We're starting a new program that is going to be, we're asked by the state to do it through the Railroad Commission, and that is energy education for teachers. 8th through 12th grade, we already have 3 modules out there, and it's fair and balanced. All energy resources are there for the students to download and the teachers. And we're going to begin workshops and training, week-long workshops. Take them to the various energy-producing parts of our country, of our state, so that teachers can take it into the classroom rather than just finding it on the internet. And you can get a lot of misinformation. Let's bring them in, take them to the experts, let the teachers then employ that into their classrooms. And we're going to produce all up to 8 to 10 modules of energy education and educate the teachers of the state of Texas.
Fantastic. Great to have you on the show. And before you leave, real quickly, tell me about the Ken Davis Speaker Series coming up.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Yes, in October 18th, we have a speaker series that was endowed by Ken Davis Foundation. And this year we have Jackie Pick. She does the Jackie Daily Show of energy interviews also.
Great.
A compliment to what you're doing here. And she does that and has had me on and several others over the years. And we have her here speaking October 18th, and everyone's invited.
And that is it. Tell me where that is.
We're going to have it at the Kelly Center at TCU campus. We do it in the fall and spring semesters.
Great. And that's open to the public?
Open to the public. You just got to let us know. So be sure and get a hold of the Energy Institute, Ken Morgan there, and let us know that you might like to come to that.
Great. Now let's talk a little bit about your partner in crime over there. We can't talk about the TCU Energy Institute without talking about someone that helps run it over there. Let's give a shout out to your partner over there.
At the Institute for Environmental Studies?
Veronica Merrill does
Oh, I'm sorry, Veronica Merrill. Yes, the person that has been with me since day one. And Veronica is, she's the queen of energy, we say, at the Energy Institute, because she's the mom for a lot of those students who are there for their energy education program. And she goes with me on the trips because she takes TCU with her, wears her purple proud, and meets the parents of that might be potential students come to our program. We have over 200 energy minors. That was a key thing for us to start. Energy education is what it's all about.
Right. But that's one of the largest clubs at TCU.
It's one of the largest clubs and a very active club. They bring in the speakers for us. And so, you know, a speaker might not answer the phone if I call, but they'll answer the phone when a student calls because they know that that's very important to our future.
Yeah. I think you've got to have people on your team to do things like that.
You do. It's a team effort. It's team effort whether it's at these great companies. It's a team effort also in the Energy Institute.
Great. Well, you'll do a great job. And this is the guy that's when it's pouring down rain and TCU's ahead like 40-0, he's still out there watching the game. And I said this before, I meant to put it in the open. As enthusiastic as Gary Patterson is for TCU football, you have that same energy towards energy.
Absolutely. You know, the game is not over till that clock runs out.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing about energy in this country. It's never over. We have to keep producing it. We have to keep investing in it. We have to keep our infrastructure going. We can't let up. That clock is always running for us.
Great. Thank you for everything
You
do.
betcha. Thank you for having me here today.
Appreciate it. Great. It's about energy, and it's about something we kind of take for granted. And when we have energy on the table, it's great to have people like Ken Morgan leading the charge to help tell that story. And he does a fantastic job, really 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So get over to the TCU Energy Institute, learn about all the exciting things that they're doing. Next person I have on the program today is also a good friend who I met through Ken Morgan, and it's Michael Slattery. Michael, thank you for being with us today.
You bet, Chris. Pleasure.
How's everything going?
All good.
Great.
TCU won yesterday. It's a good thing.
That's right. You frogs live and die by that, doesn't
I know. Well, we got a great team.
you? Do, don't you? I saw you out there with the AD.
Indeed. 6
Yeah.
a.m. and the AD and the Chancellor were serving donuts. What a great place to work.
That is, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Tell me about what's going on. When I think about energy and we talk about wind plays a huge role, but it almost plays a second fiddle a lot of times.
Well, it does. I mean, it plays a huge role, of when you look at the energy portfolio in Texas, wind accounts for just over 15% of all of our electricity. It's often overlooked because we're an oil and gas state. But the reality is, wind in the next couple of years will go past nuclear energy in our portfolio, and it's only growing. The regulatory environment, the economic environment, the rules that have come out of Austin have been extremely progressive when it comes to wind. So it's no longer just a niche technology. And in fact, Texas is now, by far and away the largest state when it comes to wind, 3 times more than any other state. So it's often on the back burner because, again, we tend to think of oil and gas, but wind is right there as a big player here.
Why do we not? I mean, when I go out to West Texas and I drive through all the wind farms, it kind of gets my attention. But why do we not give wind more attention?
Well, again, part of it is the legacy of oil and gas here. Part of it is the reality that wind is what we call a non-dispatchable technology. It's intermittent, right? We know that when the sun goes down, solar doesn't work very well. Well, it's the same with wind. When it doesn't blow, wind doesn't work. But we have enough of a resource here in West Texas, and then stretches right up through, the Midwest. We call that the Saudi Arabia of wind. I mean, it's an enormous resource of wind. And so that's where the electrons are generated. So you're right, when you drive out to West Texas, you see these wind farms that are 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 turbines on a wind farm. Everything is bigger in Texas, and wind is one of them.
Great. Where do you see wind going in the future?
In Texas, it's growing. We currently have 21 gigawatts of wind installed on the ground, and that is going to continue to grow. If we were a individual country, if we were an independent country, and I know there are some in this great state that think we should be, but if we were, we would be 6th in the world in terms of wind energy, and that is only going to continue to grow. And so it looks like that wind will go through 28,000 megawatts, 28 gigawatts, within the next 3 to 4 years, given what's online and the projects that are on the interconnection queue.
Dr. Slattery, I appreciate that. Now, if I knew what a gigawatt was, or if I knew how to compute that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I'd probably be sitting there.
Well, I'll give you a quick context. So the wind turbines that you see in West Texas, right? Most of them are 1.5 megawatt machines.
Right.
So when they're spinning at their optimum capacity, they're generating 1.5 megawatts of power, not energy, but power. That's the instantaneous power rating.
Okay.
And so I often get asked, what does that mean, right? How much electricity can wind realistically put in the grid?
Right.
And what it means is more or less about 340 individual homes. One turbine can provide enough electricity to power 340 American homes because, of course, the demand from a U.S. household is very different than the demand from a household in Vietnam, for example. So when you look at a turbine, think 340 or so homes per year. So in the U.S., that's about 25 million homes of electricity. It's large.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when do we start taking? I mean, because I think solar is kind of being taken serious. When do we put wind on the grid?
Well, I mean, it's there, right?
Right.
I mean, and I would say a decade ago, before I got into the wind game, it was a developing and still to some extent a niche market. And in Texas, that was largely dependent on the fact that we didn't have the transmission lines to get in here, when I say in here, the Metroplex, Austin, San Antonio, for example. Most of that wind, almost all of it, in fact, stayed out in West Texas. And it was only in 2008 when Texas decided to invest in the transmission and build those power lines into the major cities that the picture really started looking good for wind. And so those transmission lines have now been built, and those electrons no longer have to stay out in West Texas. We get them into where the people live. And that's one of the great challenges of wind. The resource is in the Midwest, and a lot of people live on the West and East Coast. So it has to be a targeted delivery of electrons as to where people live.
Yeah, when I think about, it's interesting when you say oil and gas state, or when you talk about that, because it's such a great resource, and I keep going to my blackout. I don't really think about energy until I have a problem.
Yeah, that's right, and I think that's the same with wind. I mean, at the end of the day, Ken Morgan, your previous guest, is absolutely right. Everything depends on energy, and in my world, it's electricity specifically, and not energy, because I don't deal in transportation fields. But everything depends on electricity. The development of this planet is dependent upon electricity. It's the fundamental underpinning of what we call economic development, and that's only growing here in the United States, but it's especially growing in places like India and China and the other developing countries. And that's one of the great challenges: is how do we get 500 million people in India who don't have access to electricity? How do we get them electricity that is efficient, affordable, and reliable? And wind isn't the answer to everything, as is coal isn't the answer to everything. It's a question of what does the geography of a region give you, and then how do you make the economic and environmental decisions and trade-offs before you put a particular generation technology in play, if that makes sense.
Great. Talk a little bit about your true love, the environment, conservation, rhinos. Give me your spiel.
Yeah, that's a new initiative for at TCU. One of the great things about working at a place like TCU is you're given the space to experiment. You're given the space as a faculty to take risks, and the mission statement of the university focuses it's all about ethical leadership and responsible citizenship. And responsible citizenship plays out into energy. It plays out into how we look after our human interests and how we balance those with the interests of other species. And so rhinos is the TCU Rhino Initiative is a program that's now almost 4 years old at TCU. This year we were very fortunate. We were awarded the Senator Paul Simon Award, one of 3 Spotlight Awards in the United States for creative internationalization programs. It's like all things at TCU, it's a team effort, right? We stand on each other's shoulders to build these types of programs. And so we're working with a group of NGOs and rhino conservationists in the Eastern Cape to try and find a way to save the species, because it is under the gun. In a decade or two, the rhinos that are on this planet will be in places like the Fort Worth Zoo. So we need to save the species.
Fantastic. Where can I learn more about that?
PlanetRhino.com.
Great. Thanks for being here today.
You bet. Pleasure, Chris.
Great. Energy, it's everywhere. It's something we take for granted. I'm just thinking to myself, if I can't find gas for my car or something, it's something. Regulatory, how do we make regulatory exciting? Mary Carter Starkey, who's done it for 10 years, she's going to tell us how to make it exciting, because it's about the health and the wealth of the wells, isn't it, Mary Carter?
It certainly is.
And
Yes, it is.
what is it? How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being here.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Good. When you talk about the health and wealth of the wells, you've been doing it for 10 years.
Yes.
You're with JETA,
Jet operating, yes. I
JETA
am.
Operating. You're president of
NOGRA, National Oil and Gas Regulatory Association.
Good. Health and wealth is so important. And that,
Well, yes, it is. I mean, given as we talked about earlier, with the boom of the Barnett Shale, what became as an outcrop of that is a huge surge in public knowledge and public awareness of drilling. And that really has been bringing to the forefront, paying more attention to how we drill, how we complete, and how we monitor and care for our wells after we've gone into production and then after they quit producing. And so it has really made the industry turn and look, and it's brought at themselves. It's forced a lot of outsiders to look at the industry, and because of that, then we now have tighter regulations. We have a lot of people wanting to put more regulations on us, and I think it's important that we have a perfect balance. You don't want to over-regulate, because that's going to just drive our industry down and become economic and make us not able to produce at an economical rate, because we put too many laws on us. And yet, we also want to be good stewards. As your prior guest said, it's important that we take care and act in a prudent and responsible way with our resources. And that's my interest, and why I think one of the reasons regulatory is important, and I like it, and I'm a huge advocate of it. But like I said, the important thing is to keep a honest discussion, a informed discussion about it, and keep it balanced in front of the public.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of misconceptions.
There's a tremendous amount of misconceptions, and that's a real problem. We're constantly having to fight things that are just simply not true, that are being brought onto the news, and special grassroots interest, really kind of made some things difficult, but it's a good conversation. The conversation needs to be had, it needs to be brought to the table, but I'm also passionate about people being properly educated. I think when the Barnett Shale came to being, it was the first time people really got to see wells being drilled. Prior to that, it was always out in the country. You only dealt with the rancher. You went onto his ranch, and so nobody ever saw the process. But bringing it into an urban environment, it really opened it up to where everybody could see it, and they weren't educated about it. And so, and I'm not so sure that we as an industry did a real good job. Maybe we could have done a little better about getting out ahead of ourselves and explaining to people when we went into neighborhoods what the process was, what it entailed, and what we were doing. And so I think we're getting better about that. I think companies are getting better about having more public talks and discussions about regulatory and really letting people know how we watch for their safety and well-being in the whole process of drilling for oil and gas.
Yeah, I mean, I think social media has changed things where people can put information out there that's misinformation.
Absolutely.
And I know Dr. Morgan can talk to the challenges that they faced over the years, but I know the industry has had to deal with a lot of films and different things like that. What do you love most about what you do?
I get to know every part of how the process works. You have to know, in my position and in the position of regulatory within a company, you work with the engineers, you work with the geologists, you work with the field staff. You have to know really a little bit of everything and learn the whole process of drilling a well, completing a well, and getting a well online, and getting it to the gas station, getting it to the pipeline. In a day that's the same, they're all different, and the whole thing about drilling for oil and gas, it's gambling. You never know if you're going to hit it or not. So we have our ups and our downs, but that always makes it just a real treat.
Okay. You've been in the industry a long time. What attracts people to the industry? Why is it a good industry for people to get into?
Well, I think there's just so much, there's so many more job opportunities. I mean, mine, for example, regulatory is a whole new division that has really become open to, there's regulation of, you said, the wind. You have regulations in the oil. You have regulations pertaining to oil and gas. You have solar regulations. All of them require that somebody be on board in the company. So it's a really great job opportunity. As I told you earlier, the oil industry is great. When it does well, it pays well.
Yeah.
And it's a gamble. It's different. It's exciting. People really, when you get into it, you'll find how exciting it is to go prospect, hunt down, purchase, go in and see if you've really made something and watch your product come to market.
Terrific. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Great. Love learning about all the different aspects, especially when we talk about energy and the different parts of it. Now I'm actually going to talk to someone about why they got into energy and what was their motivation to do that, because I think that's kind of interesting. Stephanie Metzger is a Texas A&M graduate. Then she ended up at TCU. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
How are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Good.
How
Thanks
are
for being here.
you? Yeah.
What made you have your parents were in petroleum.
No, they were not.
You liked problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
You liked math.
Mm-hmm.
What made you want to get into petroleum engineering?
Gosh, so I knew I wanted to do engineering, but I wasn't quite sure what kind. And my parents have a lot of great family friends that grew up and just worked their way through the oil and gas industry. And they talked to me my senior year of high school, and they explained to me they just showed how passionate they were about what they did. They showed how kind the people were in the industry. The oil and gas industry is full of really great people and great people to be around and people to learn from. And they told me it was a great industry for young adults and especially women to get in. And so I just took a little leap of faith and I signed up for it, and I never looked back. It was like nothing I had ever known, and I just love learning. So it was a new thing to just jump into, and I loved it so much. Thank goodness.
What do you love most about the industry?
Gosh, I think like everyone said, it's ever changing. It's no day is the same. There's always something new to do. There's always, there's a new technology that's completely changing the game. And then when prices drop, you've got to figure out how to still make money. And so it's not just dependent on your industry. The entire economics of the world, what's happening in the world, that all plays into what you're doing at your job as well. And so it keeps you on your toes. It's really great.
Great. Okay, Stephanie, a lot of kids, they say to their parents, I don't know what I want to do. You were one of those kids, right? Okay, so what are your thoughts? If someone says, I don't know what I want to do.
Gosh.
Why should they get into this industry?
This industry, well, especially for a young person, it's a wonderful industry to get into. It's always going to be here. We're always going to need energy, and especially now as we're becoming even more and more of a consumer-based nation, we're going to need industry for the long run, for our foreseeable future. So it's something that's here to stay. And it's exciting. It's like nothing you've ever done or you've ever known. You don't learn it in high school as of now. You never know if they're going to initiate that in high school, but it's a brand new thing that you get to learn, and the people are great. They're wonderful to work with.
Training? Do you feel like you were good training provided for you?
Yeah, so I was actually a drilling intern in college, and so I got to spend the summer going and hanging out on the rigs, and it was just so cool. It was just massive machine that I'd never seen before. But they trained me, and I got to see and learn like hands-on where all of this was coming from, and I still look back on that summer and see how it impacted what I do today. So
Great.
yeah.
I'm with Stephanie Metzger, and she's with XTO. She's a petroleum engineer. Oh, good catch there. She went to Texas A&M, and she went to TCU, and she's talking about why she likes being a petroleum engineer, and she loves the industry, and she would encourage anyone to think about getting in the industry. And what's the takeaway? She's on LinkedIn.
I am, yes.
She's not real active on social media.
No, I'm not.
She's involved with her church.
I'm very involved I'm super involved in church. I think that's my favorite thing about the industry is I chose it because I could either stay in Texas where my family is from, and then there's also really cool abroad opportunities. But thankfully, my job took me back to Fort Worth, which is the sweetest city. It's a city where I found a church home, got super involved, and as a whole, it's completely changed my life. It's really great.
That's great.
So,
yeah, it's a great industry.
It is, yeah.
And I'm glad you've had so much success with it.
Thank you.
So thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Good. Terrific. Well, that has been our program on energy, and I think it's been a great program. I want to go to our little Q&A section if we can real quick, because I've had people every week ask me different questions. One of the questions I have every week is about our reversed logos, or why they're reversed or mirrored. And the reason they're mirrored is because on Facebook, that's why they show up both ways. So that's one of the reasons that we do our reverse mirrors. Doing a little balancing act down here. So I hope everyone's had a great week. Really enjoyed our guest today about how energy is everywhere and the role that it plays, and how it plays a part of every aspect of our lives. And that's something, like I said, I don't really think it's something that we really even think about or even register. And like I said, I think for me, unless there's a blackout, unless I need gas or something but it involves our life, and it's such a huge part of our lives. So I thank all of our guests for being with us today on Inside Fort Worth Business. But the mirrored logos are that way when we go live on Facebook, that we can see the logos both ways is one of the reasons that we actually do that. One of our other questions that we got with our kind of Q&A section, let me see if I can get in one other Q&A section that I'm looking for, is how do you determine what stories you want to cover? And really what we try to do we take different topics each week and kind of try to make them relevant topics based on what's going on, and we kind of try to pick a different topic. This is Inside Fort Worth Business. We're thrilled that you've turned in each and every week at 12 noon. We're here live on Facebook and on YouTube. And this has been a great show. I really enjoyed this show more than I enjoy all the shows, but I've really enjoyed having these guys on the show this week. Please tune in next Sunday at noon for Inside Fort Worth Business. I'm your host, Chris Quinn.